passed. That said, it's not an abduction. She asked me to come get her. No!
Made us all believe that her story was true.
When a young mother of two vanished without a trace during a routine afternoon jog, the community of Redding, California was thrown into panic.
Sherri Papini. Sherri Papini. Sherri Papini.
News of her sudden disappearance dominated headlines, and as days turned into weeks, people began to fear the worst. Sherri Papini's story captured national attention, and when she was miraculously found 22 days later, it seemed like a rare, happy ending to a harrowing ordeal. But what no one could have predicted was the shocking twist that would follow, a twist involving a secret lover, a meticulously planned hoax, and a betrayal that stunned the nation. Sherri Papini was a 34-year-old wife and mother of two young children. Described by her friends and neighbors as kind-hearted, attentive, and deeply involved in her children's lives, she seemed to embody the image of a picture-perfect suburban mom. Keith Papini, her husband, worked long hours to support the family, while Sherri stayed home to raise their kids and manage their household. On the afternoon of November 2nd, 2016, Keith arrived home from work around 5:01 p.m. He expected to find Sherri preparing dinner, but instead, he was greeted by an eerie silence. Their children were still at daycare, and there was no sign of Sherri. Growing concerned, Keith began calling her phone repeatedly, but each call went unanswered. Desperate to find out where she was, Keith used the Find My iPhone app, which led him to a nearby jogging trail. When he arrived, he found something alarming. Sherri's phone lying on the ground, with her earbuds neatly wrapped around it. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, and no torn clothing. The scene was strange and unsettling. Keith immediately contacted the police, reporting his wife as missing.
911, what is your emergency?
I just got home from work, and my wife wasn't there, which is unusual, and my kids should have been there by now from, daycare. So I was like, oh, maybe she went on a walk. I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up, so I got freaked out, so I hit, the Find My iPhone app thing, and it said that it showed her phone, at our end of our driveway. We don't have really good service.
Okay.
Not the end of our driveway, but the end of our street. So I just drove down there, and I saw her phone with her headphones because she started running again. And I found her phone, and it's got, hair ripped out of it, in the headphones. So I'm, totally freaking out, thinking, somebody, grabbed her.
Okay, what's your address?
He described the events leading up to her disappearance and emphasized that Sherri was not the type to leave without explanation. She loved her children dearly and wouldn't abandon them. Within hours, local law enforcement organized a search. Volunteers from the community joined in, combing through nearby woods and trails. Helicopters scanned the area from above, while search and rescue dogs tried to pick up Sherri's scent. News of her disappearance spread quickly, drawing attention from both regional and national media.
Today we're focusing on this woman, Sherri Papini. A lot of people talking about this one. It's made national news.
Sherri Papini's life before her disappearance seemed idyllic on the surface. She and her husband, Keith, had been married for several years and lived in a modest home in a quiet neighborhood in Redding. Friends and neighbors described them as a loving couple, though there were hints of past struggles in Sherri's life. Sherri's childhood friends later described her as someone who craved attention and often spun exaggerated stories. She had reportedly claimed to have survived bizarre incidents in the past, including being the target of a trafficking ring, though these claims were never substantiated. Some acquaintances speculated that these tendencies might have contributed to the events that unfolded in 2016. Despite these rumors, Sherri's disappearance was treated with utmost seriousness by law enforcement. Keith's emotional plea for help in finding his wife resonated deeply with the public, and soon national media outlets picked up the story. Social media campaigns using hashtags like #FindSherri spread rapidly, bringing in thousands of tips from across the country. Meanwhile, Sherri's parents and sister also made public appearances, urging anyone with information to come forward. The Papini family painted a picture of a devoted mother who would never leave her children voluntarily, reinforcing the idea that she must have been abducted against her will. Despite the large-scale search efforts, no significant leads emerged in the first few days. The community was growing increasingly anxious, and Keith made several emotional public appeals, urging anyone with information to come forward. Then on Thanksgiving morning, 22 days after she vanished, A call came in from a truck driver who had spotted a disoriented woman walking along County Road 17 near Woodland, California.
Hi, I have an emergency. There's a lady on the side of the road needing help. She's chained up, her vision's blurry, and she needs an ambulance.
Do you see her chained up?
Yes, her name is Sherri Papini.
The woman was bruised, covered in dirt, and had restraints around her wrists. She identified herself as Sherri Papini. Keith rushed to the hospital where Sherri had been taken. He was overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. Sherri, however, appeared deeply shaken. According to her account, she had been abducted by two Hispanic women who held her captive in a basement-like room. She described her captors as cruel and sadistic, claiming they had physically abused her, branded her shoulder with a heated tool, and kept her bound for most of her captivity. Sherri's return was seen as nothing short of a miracle. The media covered her story extensively, portraying her as a courageous survivor of a brutal crime. Vigils were held in her honor, and the community celebrated her safe return. But beneath the surface, investigators began to harbor doubts about her story. From the outset, certain aspects of Sherri's account didn't add up. For instance, she claimed her captors had worn masks throughout her captivity, making it difficult to provide detailed descriptions of them. The branding marks she mentioned appeared superficial, almost as if it had been done in haste. Additionally, there were no signs of malnourishment or severe dehydration, which would be expected after 3 weeks in captivity. Investigators also noted inconsistencies in her timeline. Sherri initially said she had been transported in a dark SUV, but when asked to recall specific details, her answers were vague and contradictory. As weeks turned into months, forensic evidence became crucial. Investigators had collected DNA samples from Sherri's clothing, hoping to identify her captors. But when the results came back, they revealed something unexpected. Male DNA was present on her clothing, and it didn't match her husband, Keith. This finding baffled law enforcement. Sherri had claimed her captors were two women, yet the DNA evidence suggested the involvement of a man. Determined to uncover the truth, investigators expanded their search, eventually leading to a stunning breakthrough in 2020. The initial phase of the investigation was focused on the area where Sherri's phone was found. Investigators scoured the trail and surrounding woods for any signs of a struggle or evidence of a possible abduction. They interviewed joggers, hikers, and locals who frequented the area, but no one reported seeing anything unusual on the day of her disappearance. As time went on, law enforcement broadened their scope, looking into Sherri's personal life to identify any potential suspects. They questioned Keith extensively, as spouses are often the first persons of interest in such cases. However, Keith was quickly ruled out after passing a polygraph test and providing a solid alibi. With no suspects and no significant leads, the case began to stall. That's when the forensic analysis of Sherri's clothing became crucial. The discovery of unknown male DNA on her clothing was puzzling, especially since Sherri insisted her captors were two women. This inconsistency raised red flags, prompting investigators to dig deeper into her past connections. In March 2020, after years of painstaking investigation, a match was found for the male DNA.
We found the house, we found who was involved, we talked to who was involved, we talked to family who knows that you were there, and talked to a couple people talked to one guy who did see you during this event. Unfortunately, there's a lot of truths, there's a lot of things that were said that we have always confirmed, that we've always said. There's a lot of truths, and then there's some unknowns. Like, all we want is to be able to tell the truth. That's all we've ever wanted from day one. The reason why you can describe the room is because you stayed in the room in the dark for hours, for days on end. The reason why you lost so much weight is because you stopped eating. The reason why you got a rash on your arm was because you cleaned his house. The reason why the brand is because he went to the store, bought the branding tools, and branded you. The reason why your nose was broke is because of a hockey stick. He passed a polygraph test. That said, it's not an abduction. She asked me to come get her. No. I rented a car. No. I drove up and picked her up.
The sample belonged to James Reyes, a man living in Costa Mesa, California. Reyes had a past relationship with Sherri, and the two had remained in contact sporadically over the years. When confronted by detectives, Reyes didn't deny his involvement. In fact, he seemed relieved to finally share his side of the story. According to Reyes, Sherri had reached out to him months before her disappearance, claiming she needed to escape from her life. Believing that she was in an abusive relationship, Reyes agreed to help her. On the day of her disappearance, Reyes picked Sherri up and brought her to his house, where she stayed for the next 3 weeks. Reyes described Sherri as being in a self-imposed exile, during which she inflicted minor injuries on herself to make her story more believable. She even cut her own hair and asked Reyes to help her create the branding mark using a heated tool. Reyes admitted he felt uncomfortable with Sherri's behavior, but didn't intervene, thinking he was helping someone in distress. When Sherri finally decided to return home, Reyes drove her to Yolo County, where she staged her dramatic reappearance.
Sherri Papini appeared in court via Zoom this morning. She admitted that she made up the story about being abducted at gunpoint and pleaded guilty to lying to federal agents and defrauding the state's victim compensation.
The revelation that Sherri had fabricated her kidnapping sent shockwaves through the community. Keith, who had supported his wife unconditionally, was devastated. He felt betrayed and humiliated by the woman he had stood by during what he believed was a genuine crisis. In the months that followed, Keith filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Meanwhile, Sherri faced legal repercussions for her actions. In March 2022, she was charged with making false statements to federal agents and committing mail fraud by accepting over $30,000 in victim compensation funds. During her court proceedings, Sherri appeared stoic and unrepentant. Initially pleading not guilty, she later accepted a plea deal. In September 2022, she was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. The judge, while acknowledging Sherri's psychological issues, emphasized that her actions had caused significant harm. Not only did she waste valuable law enforcement resources, but she also damaged the credibility of real victims who come forward with genuine cases of abduction and abuse. When the truth about Sherri's hoax was revealed, the public reaction was one of shock and outrage. Many felt betrayed, having invested emotionally in her story. People who had donated money to the reward fund and victim assistance programs were particularly angry, feeling that their generosity had been exploited. Social media, which had initially been used to spread awareness about Sherri's disappearance, now became a platform for criticism and ridicule. Memes mocking her story went viral, and hashtags like Rajon Sherri hoax trended for weeks. Meanwhile, some supporters argued that Sherri might have been suffering from mental health issues and deserved compassion rather than scorn. The case sparked debates about the line between criminal accountability and psychological illness, with opinions divided on whether her sentence was fair. The legal case against Sherri Papini was complex. Prosecutors argued that her actions had caused significant harm, both emotionally and financially. By fabricating her abduction, she had diverted valuable law enforcement resources away from genuine cases, potentially endangering real victims in need of help. Moreover, Sherri's acceptance of over $30,000 in victim compensation funds constituted fraud. Prosecutors sought a sentence that would serve as a deterrent to others who might consider similar hoaxes. During the sentencing hearing, Sherri's defense team argued that she suffered from psychological issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and anxiety. They presented evidence of her troubled past, suggesting that these factors contributed to her irrational behavior. Ultimately, the judge handed down an 18-month prison sentence, a decision that was met with mixed reactions. Some felt the punishment was too lenient, given the scale of the hoax, while others believed it was fair, considering her mental health struggles. The media's role in the Papini case cannot be overstated. From the moment Sherri's disappearance was reported, local news stations covered the story extensively. National networks soon followed, with high-profile anchors discussing the case during primetime slots. Public interest in the case grew exponentially when Sherri was found alive. Headlines described her as a survivor who had endured unimaginable horrors. Talk shows featured experts speculating about her ordeal, and true crime enthusiasts dissected every available detail online. However, when the truth about the hoax emerged, the media's tone shifted dramatically. News outlets that had once sympathized with Sherri began publishing scathing critiques of her actions. Some accused her of exploiting racial stereotypes by blaming Hispanic women for her supposed abduction. The backlash was swift and severe. Sherri's story became a symbol of deception, and her name was permanently etched into the annals of infamous true crime cases. Sherri Papini's case is a bizarre and cautionary tale of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Her fabricated story captivated the nation, only to end in a shocking revelation that left many feeling deceived. While Sherri may have served her prison sentence, the impact of her actions lingers. Her husband, her children, and the community that once rallied around her have been left to pick up the pieces of a hoax that went too far. In the world of true crime, few stories are as strange and unsettling as the tale of Sherri Papini, the mother who faked her own kidnapping to reunite with a former lover, only to be exposed by the very evidence she tried to manipulate. Ultimately, the story of Sherri Papini is a complex and cautionary tale. It serves as a reminder that not everything is as it seems, and that deception, no matter how elaborate, can have far-reaching consequences. While Sherri's actions caused pain and confusion for many, they also highlighted the resilience of the community that came together in search of a missing mother. Her story remains one of the most bizarre and talked about true crime cases in recent history, a stark example of how far some people will go to seek attention and validation. In the world of true crime, there are tales of cold-blooded murder, elaborate fraud, and mysterious disappearances. But few are as strange, twisted, and unsettling as the case of Sherri Papini.